Alright, this should be recording. So, about a year ago, I basically did a review calling Intel garbage. And I really do stand by that statement. And one of the main factors is just the overwhelming security vulnerabilities that exist within Intel. And I know this video is titled Intel and Nvidia. I'll get to Nvidia in a little bit. If I can talk. So, Intel security issues. I think they have, since I made that video, even more security issues have come out. I think there was a second version of Zombie Load. You can just look any of this shit up on. Just go through some of these. At the end of the day, if you're buying anything that's critical to how do I put this? If you're buying a computer and you're doing certain things on it, like online banking, one, you want to make sure the operating system isn't full of random shit like Windows 10 with all its telemetry, spyware, and malware. And I do mean that seriously. I mean, with Windows, everything you do near it, like when you're talking, gets recorded and sent to Cortana. Everything you type on it gets sent to Microsoft. Everything you do online gets sent to Microsoft. So you don't want to do online banking on Windows 10 for those reasons, because you don't want Microsoft having your bank information. But I would argue ultimately what processor is in your computer also matters, because if the hardware has security problems, then you're going to have issues down the line. It might not happen, but it's a risk you have to live with. And I would argue that with all of Intel's security shit that's gone wrong, they're literally not worth a penny. I wouldn't pay a penny for an Intel CPU, honestly. I don't care how competitive it is compared to AMD. I wouldn't spend a penny on it. The fact that it has I think we're up to 12 or 13 different security vulnerabilities now, and I don't hear a single thing about them getting fixed. I just hear the same shit. Oh, we're the best at gaming. We're the best at this. We're please buy our shit. I honestly don't hear anything from Intel saying, hey, we recognize we have a problem. Our new processors have fixed this problem. They don't do that in marketing for some reason. And if they have, I have yet to see it. And I stay up to date on this shit very regularly. Yeah, Zombie Load was one of them. There's 2 Zombie Loads now. Here's another article. I mean, you can look this shit up yourself. Continue with ad blocker. I mean, they're just pile of shit, and you want me to pay you for your shit website? Jesus Christ. Spectre and Meltdown did affect both, but we're going beyond that at this point. I mean, you've got the point where if someone takes control over your hardware, they have access to everything, and it doesn't matter if you encrypt anything or not, because they can get around the encryption. Intel truly just makes garbage CPUs, and we're what, at 14 nanometers still? They haven't updated that for shit. They've basically lost any ability to compete. And it's just a shit show on Intel's part. And I mean, look at Apple. When Skylake came out, I mean, Apple was the biggest finder of bugs in Skylake, and that ultimately led Apple to a path where right now Apple's making their own M1 chips for their own systems. So now they control the hardware, the software, and literally everything down to the processor level. Everything that goes into those computers that Apple makes is owned and made by them. They don't have to rely on anyone. And that's good and bad. So, on a professional level, I think I've mentioned this before, if you're video editing or some shit, you're going to want more than 16 gigs of RAM. But you can't get that anymore on Macs. I doubt you ever could. I don't know. At least not on the laptops. I don't use Macs, so I don't fucking know. But you're not going to be able to have more than 16 for the moment, unless they release a better processor with more RAM, which I don't know if they're going to do. I mean, let's think about where Intel is right now. So if I go down to administration here, and I actually switch to the Ubuntu version from Linux Mint Debian Edition, there were some issues I was having. It's just easier to uninstall the old kernels, and there's some ease of use shit that goes into Ubuntu, unfortunately. So this laptop's very old. I mean, I'm using a fucking Q70. We'll get into that. That's not what I wanted to show. PCI devices. So I have an Wi-Fi 6 AX200 in this laptop. Another reason why I used to love Dell at least. Dell fucking sucks now. They are one of the worst fucking companies to deal with now. I've always liked the fact that, if I buy a laptop like this one that didn't come with the backlit keyboard, they did shortcuts, and so the connector on the motherboard was still there for the backlit keyboard, so I could just buy a backlit keyboard and shove it in, which is what I did with this. And of course, there's no blacklist or anything in the BIOS, so I can just update any part with anything, and it works so long as it's compatible. But as you can see, I have an Intel Wi-Fi 6 card, and the reason for that is, so long as you keep your kernel up to date, as you can see, I have kernel 5.9.12. If we go to their website here, here we go. So it's included in the kernel, so all you need to do is do that web search, and so this is the card I have, so long as I have kernel 5.1 or newer, I'm going to be fine. My Wi-Fi and Bluetooth will work just fine. And that's basically the only good point with Intel right now, is if you want Wi-Fi or Bluetooth and you run Linux, or I would argue any operating system for that fucking matter, if you have a 1 gig LAN port or you need Wi-Fi, Intel is the way to go for both of those. For LAN ports, Realtek really doesn't have an issue. It's mostly with Wi-Fi that I've had issues with Realtek. But in general, I would prefer having an Intel LAN port over Realtek. Realtek is just a fucking terrible company, honestly. I've had a lot of issues with their Wi-Fi, and quite frankly, I don't trust their LAN ports all that well. There is one in here that works fine, but I would much prefer to deal with Intel LAN than anything else. If you're going 2.5 gigs or 10 gigs, for 10 gigs I would go with a Quantia. 2.5, I don't know what I'd go with. I don't know if Intel does make that. Arvel's pretty good in the Linux space because they do a lot of server work. I can't really say much bad about Marvell, but Realtek is just shit. So Intel does do good when it comes to wireless and networking. They are the best in that, in my opinion. So if you're buying a motherboard, and you have a 1 gig LAN port, if it's Intel, I would say go with that motherboard. If you need Wi-Fi or Bluetooth in your laptop, I would say go with Intel. If you need a new CPU, I would tell you stay the fuck away from Intel, simply because of the fact that they haven't really competed much at all. And, I mean, like I said, we're still on 14 nanometer. I think we're up to 12 or 13 security vulnerabilities in their shit. I don't know if they fixed it or not, because whenever I read their press updates, I don't see, anything like, oh, well, we acknowledge our previous CPU had this many security issues, we've fixed them, here's how we fix them. I don't see that from Intel. What I see is childish shit like, I think it was the day before or the day of when Ryzen 5000 launched. They did some puff piece about how they're still good at gaming. It's like, first of all, I don't game on my PC, I use it for work. Not that I could anyways on this piece of shit. I'm much more into consoles. In fact, I've actually been playing a game I just picked up yesterday, Super Mario Galaxy for the Wii on my Wii U. I'm much more into consoles, honestly. Simply because when you buy something for a console, you legitimately own it. Aside from GOG.com, I wouldn't recommend fucking Steam or anything for PC gaming, honestly. But I honestly don't see jack shit coming out of Intel that persuades me to buy their CPU after, the tons of shit that I've seen them have with their CPUs. So I'm using a Linfield Core i7. It's 45 nanometers, it's old as shit. CPU X is Xorg's version of CPU Z, by the way. In case you don't know what that is. So honestly, it's AMD or nothing for CPUs for me. Just solely because when I read their press releases, yeah, sure, they might fudge the numbers a little bit, or maybe they do their testing in a way that makes them look good. That's to be expected, they're a business. But, I don't see mountains of security vulnerabilities out of AMD. I might see, besides Spectre Meltdown, which they remedied. I think I've maybe seen one other security vulnerability on AMD's side, and I'm pretty sure they fixed it. I just don't see security researchers finding tons of issues with their hardware. I don't see companies like Apple, although Apple never worked with AMD for CPUs. I don't see any company like Apple or anything else that might use AMD's. Google actually is a great example, because Google does use a lot of AMD CPUs. I don't see fucking Google finding tons of security vulnerabilities and bugs in the CPU or APUs that they use for their Chromebooks, like Apple found in Skylake. And so I just can't recommend Intel for anything other than networking. Now, Nvidia, on the other hand, is arguably worse. So, if you're in the Linux space, you probably know Nvidia's had kind of a rough go. So there's two options for drivers. There's free and open source, or FOSS, free and open source software, version for AMD, which is what I'm using right now, which is great because if you have an old laptop like this, it still supports the graphics card, even though AMD no longer does, so I couldn't use the proprietary drivers even if I wanted to. They don't exist anymore. So that's good. And I would recommend FOSS drivers just in general, because on AMD's side, the FOSS drivers tend to work better than the proprietary ones. Now with Nvidia, however, it's the opposite. Their FOSS drivers are shit. They've always been shit. And part of the reason for that is it's very hard to code for Nvidia's drivers, unless you work with Nvidia, because they put so much proprietary crap into their graphics cards. And that's always been the biggest issue. I think you can look this up on YouTube, but there's actually a chart that was done. Nvidia FOSS. versus... There was a chart that was done that basically showed just how big of a disparity, is that the word I'm looking for? Between the drivers there were. I forget, I think it's Nouveau or something. So this was literally last year. So, you know, they've been around in the Linux space for a while. I mean, they were working on AMD, not AMD, Android. So, you know, they've had Android tablets and shit. Like, look at the Switch. And now they own ARM. Jesus fucking Christ, that's going to be a nightmare. I'm pretty sure. I'm not saying their graphics cards suck, because they're not. The problem is, I don't want to have to choose between free and open source or them, because they're going to lose every day of the week. I don't want to feel like I'm forced to use their proprietary drivers, which is what I feel like, because the fact of the matter is they put so much proprietary shit into their graphics cards, the FOSS drivers just can't compete with their proprietary ones. So I'm hoping that that article I just showed makes it so the FOSS drivers work better, but I really don't have high hopes. And when you look at some of the shit they've done last generation and this generation, and they haven't done it yet this generation, but I'm pretty sure they will, where they release a set of graphics cards, and then they realize, oh fuck, the competition is actually good, rather than admitting that, oh, we've got competition on it. And no, they relaunched their whole entire fucking lineup, and they screwed over their own fucking customers. I didn't buy one, but like, if I bought a 2080, and you know, let's say that card costs $700 fucking dollars, I don't remember off the top of my head, I'm gonna feel like shit when the 2080 Super comes out, because now I feel like I just fucking wasted my money. And that's kind of the issue I have with Nvidia, is, you know, they're putting so much proprietary shit in their graphics cards. They've made it very difficult for software engineers to work on an alternative in the Linux space, and it's taken them forever to do so. They overpriced the fuck out of the 2080 Ti. That was way fucking overpriced. And then you have the shit that happened with hardware unboxed. Honestly, as much as I would like to use an Nvidia card, because again, they are good, but some of the shit they've done as a company, I just can't support them with my money. And I would advise people take a good hard look at some of the shit they've done. And honestly, the fact of the matter is, if you can get a competing card from AMD for $500 cheaper, and it does almost as good, I would honestly say just buy AMD at this point. That's always been my thing anyways. I've always gone with AMD just because it's fucking easier. You know, I just put the graphic card in my system and it fucking works. I heard there's some issues with this round. I'm not sure, so don't quote me on that. But for the most part, if you buy an AMD graphics card, it'll just work. That's not the case with Nvidia. And there's been some steps to remedy that, but at this point, I honestly don't know anymore. I'm really hoping things get better with Nvidia, but I'm not going to hold my breath. And I know I haven't released a video in a month. Excuse me. So I'm going to release another video this week. But this was basically just a thought I've been dealing with. Because with a lot of the shit I've seen with Intel, I honestly think they should either radically change their business model or just give up making CPUs at this point. I mean, they have nothing left. I mean, they're getting their ass fucking handed to them in the server space. They're getting their ass handed to them in the personal desktop space for gamers and content creators and workstations. They're getting their ass handed to them in the laptop space. Not so much in the laptop space, actually, because AMD has kicked themselves, or shot themselves in the foot, because you limited to 64 gigs of RAM, which is half of what Intel can. And actually, they're still pretty competitive, but that's beside the point. I still wouldn't recommend it, because I'm going back to Intel for a second here before I go to Nvidia, but this is going to tie the two together. If you want a powerful Nvidia graphics card, for the most part, if you go to any pre-built fucking computer, especially in laptops, you are forced to buy Intel. If you want anything above 1080p for a screen, you are forced to buy Intel. And honestly, I don't see AMD having the same issues that Intel and Nvidia have in the laptop space either, where I am forced to buy something I don't want to get an AMD processor. In fact, more often than not, I am forced to buy something I don't want just to get an AMD processor. I know this is confusing, but stay with me. Let's say I want a backlit keyboard and a DVD drive. HP has one. It's got the latest 4000 CPU. But if I want to step up from a 1080p screen to a 4K screen, I have to give up that AMD processor that I want, and I'm forced to buy Intel. If I want a Nvidia graphics card, I am forced to buy Intel. I don't see these types of shit happening with AMD. I know this is confusing, but it's basically saying, hey, if you want the more powerful laptop, fuck AMD. That's basically what Dell, Lenovo, and every fucking company is doing at this point. And especially if you're trying to buy a mobile workstation. And it fucking pisses me off. It really does. I don't see AMD competing like this. In fact, I find it hard and actually quite impressive that they're competing at all. Because Nvidia and Intel are very clearly buying off Lenovo and all these hardware manufacturers to prioritize their shit. I honestly don't see how anything else could be true. I really don't. And I would really like to see Nvidia start being more pro-consumer. I would like to see them work more with FOSS drivers, so that way we don't have to install the proprietary ones for our fucking computer to work. I would like to see Nvidia stop fucking people over like Hardware Unboxed and doing this shady shit. I would like to see Intel actually fucking admit they're fucking wrong and admit the fact that they suck and move on and start being competitive again. But I honestly don't see that happening. In fact, I think Nvidia's going to keep being anti-consumer, and I think Intel's eventually just going to give up the CPU market, because I honestly, either that or they're just going to keep being stubborn assholes and claim they're competitive when they're not. I honestly don't know what else to say at this point. Intel and Nvidia have a lot of fucking issues. Intel more than Nvidia. And honestly, if you're going to buy a CPU, I'd say go AMD. And if you're going to buy a GPU, sure, you could go on Nvidia, but you might regret your purchase when they come out with the Super or the TI or whatever fucking bullshit, when they realize they've got some competition on their hands. And that's going to make you feel like shit. And that's just the way the fucking market is right now. And it's unfortunate. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video.